Hi everyone. How are all of you? I see so many people here already. Good evening. Hi Anshita. Hi Papia. Hi Suhani. Hi Gungun. Hi Anshita. Hi Keshvi. Okay. Again, before I continue, my first question to you all always is, can I be seen and can I be heard? Because Nikesh has already put, ma'am, you're perfectly audible and visible, because you all know that's what I'm going to ask you, right? Okay, great. Okay, now today, welcome. Baiju's 8 to 10 term to discussion for economics. Last time that we were discussing economics, what chapter did we discuss? Last time we discussed money and credit, and today we are going to be discussing globalization and the Indian economy. And I know for a fact that a lot of you have been waiting for this particular chapter. I keep getting a lot of comments about it, and the last time that I was conducting a session, so many people, gangster, hey, gaming gangster, that's a really nice name. Good evening. Okay, Adiraj says first live I'm watching. I used to watch only after the live. Very good, then you're attending right on time. Okay, let's just move on and talk about globalization and the Indian economy. Now, this chapter is actually, I would say, one of my favorite chapters, because I love the concept of globalization. You know why? I love the concept of globalization because it makes me feel like the whole world is this very together place, very united place, very global. It's like a big or maybe a small global village, but I like the idea that we are all together and connected, right? So personally, I like this chapter because of that. Now, let me tell you how I am going to be explaining this chapter. So, this over here is a mind map, as usual, of what we're going to be covering in this chapter today. Now, these are the major topics, and as we go along, we will be dealing with the subtopics also. But basically, this is the macro concept of the entire chapter, and you will find that we will be answering or explaining these concepts in question and answer format, which means that after I've explained the topic, I will be giving you possible questions that could come for your exam from these particular topics, so that you've understood the concept and you've understood how to explain the answer the question also. So basically, you will be more prepared, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. Yes, Disha says, good evening, ma'am. Super excited for the session. Me too. I see a lot of people saying very, very excited. Archana says, very excited. Byju's is best of all. Yes, it is. I agree. East or West, Byju's is the best. Let's see what we're going to be discussing in today's chapter. We're going to be talking about production across countries, where we're going to be discussing MNCs or multinational companies. We're going to be talking about interlinking production across countries. We're going to be talking about foreign trade and integration of markets. We are, of course, going to be talking about globalization. Logically, this is what the chapter is about. We will be talking about the factors that enable globalization. We will be talking about the WTO, and we will be talking about the impact of globalization, both the positive and the negative impacts. Papia says, I missed you for 2 weeks. I missed all of you too, and I'm very happy to be here now. Okay, so let's just jump into the first topic for today, which is production across countries. Now, in production across countries, we're going to be talking about the meaning of multinational companies, and we're going to be discussing some examples of multinational companies. Now, talking about multinational companies, it's very interesting. Approximately 2 decades ago, which means 20 years ago, basically before the liberalization policy of 1991, we had no MNCs over here, right? At this point in time, India was a mere importer of finished goods and exporter of raw materials and food. Now, what does this mean? Let me give you an example in terms of cotton. Now, let's say that we know that cotton cultivation, for example, happens in India. So what was India doing? India was exporting this raw cotton to countries abroad, like you can see. And then what was happening was that these finished goods, for example, like the garment or the t-shirt, was coming back to India as an import. Okay. Now, what is happening as a result of this? As a result of this, actually, this is not a very ideal situation for economic growth, because what is happening over here is that we're actually losing revenue. When we're getting the finished product back in terms of imports, where we are spending in foreign we're spending in foreign currency. So this is bound to be more expensive for us than if we were making the finished goods ourselves over here, right? So this is not the ideal situation, and things needed to sort of jump up a little bit more economically in terms of economic growth. And then we had the multinational companies or MNCs that entered our country. Right now, what is a multinational company? Let me tell you about this. A multinational company is a company that owns or controls production in more than one nation. Let me give you an example. Let us say that there is one company that has its headquarters. I'll put this for you in a different color. Maybe you can see it in green. It has its headquarters here in USA. Right? Now, this same company probably has its factory or production processes over here in China. Right? This same company has its sales office here in Mexico. And it has its customer service representation or customer service or relations operations happening over here in India. Now you see how all these countries are connected globally. Now think of a multinational corporation's point of view. I mean, if I was to think of it logically, the first time I heard of this, I was like, why is this so complicated? I mean, why can't a company just have its headquarters in one place, factory production in one place, sales office in one place, as well as customer service? Why such a complicated system across so many countries? But think about it like this. What is the goal? What is the goal of any sort of company? The goal of any company or organization is profit, right? Or saving money. So if you think about it, this kind of setup will actually help them to save money. How? Let me explain this to you. This company, which is in USA, wants to invest in factory production, but the factory production, the place where they will get cheap or skilled labor could be a place like China. So instead of hiring labor in USA, which would probably be more expensive from them, they're able to get this at much lower costs in China, so it makes economic sense, right? Then, if you think of sales office, why choose Mexico? Mexico, if you see, is so strategically located to so many other countries of the world. It's close to USA. It has complete connectivity with other countries. So it has access to markets. So this also makes a lot more sense, right? Rather than sticking to one particular region. Also, if you think about it in terms of India, India has skilled labor, people who have technical skills and speak such great English. So India makes perfect sense in terms of a customer relations office, right? So basically what this company is doing, by spreading out in so many different parts of the world, it is saving money and it is gaining more profits. And this is the goal of any organization or any company. Right, so you may get a question that says, why do MNCs operate in various countries? It's probably like a 2-mark question. Very simple, you only need to list down these points. See, if it's a 2-mark question, I've always told you, just put it in points, this much amount of points is enough. If it's a 3-mark question or a 5-mark question, then you need to give more points or more content. We will be explaining all those sort of questions also along the way, right? Now, why do MNCs operate in various companies? Why am I going on saying companies? Why do MNCs operate in several countries? Well, I just explained this to you in the other example. This is because they can get cheap and skilled labor, they have closeness to various markets, there is cost saving, and thus naturally because of this they earn greater profits, right? So this is the reason why MNCs operate in various different countries. Now, you could get the same question in a different way. You could probably get a question that asks you, how are MNCs able to gain greater profits? Harsh says, it's my birthday today. Hi Harsh, happy birthday. Okay, how are MNCs able to gain greater profits? Well, the answer is the same. MNCs set up offices and factories for production in regions where they can get cheap labor and other resources. This reduces their cost of production and thereby MNCs earn greater profits. This is the same question that is being asked to you in a different way. So the reason that we put this down for you over here is that you should be aware that the same question or the same points can be asked for in different sort of questions, but the answer remains the same. Right, that this is where they will for cheap and skilled labor, for closeness to markets, for cost saving, and for greater profits. Now, you could also get another question, another type of question for the same points to ask you which regions are favorable for MNCs to set up production. Again, it's the same thing. Which regions will be favorable for them? Where it is close to the markets, where there is skilled and unskilled labor available at low cost, and where the availability of other factors of production are assured. Right? So same question asked in many different ways. Answer remains the same, and this is why I wanted to tell you. Okay, so we've spoken about MNCs, the advent of MNCs into India. Let's move and talk about our next topic, which is interlinking of production across different countries. Now, I just explained to you a little bit. I gave you an example of how a MNC, what is happening to my words today? I think I need to pause and then breathe and then say, okay. We just discussed how MNCs have presence in different countries, right? Now, what I explained to you earlier is not the only way that MNCs can enter a country. There are actually 4 different ways in which MNCs can enter a country. You could have an MNC's presence in a country in terms of foreign investments. You could have a presence of an MNC in a different country where that MNC works jointly with local producers. You could have an entry of an MNC in a country with that MNC buying over a local company, and you can have a presence of that MNC in a particular country by handing over production to small producers. Now, you may get a question to ask you, what is the way that MNCs establish connection or contact with other countries? And these would be the 4 points. Number 1, foreign investment. Number 2, working jointly with local producers. Number 3, buying local companies. And number 4, handing over production to small producers. This is, if it is a 1 mark or a 2 mark question, you only need to put down these points. But what if it is a 3 mark question or a 5 mark question? Well, then you need more points, for which I'm going to go ahead and explain each of these points to you, right? So let's discuss the first point that I spoke about. Way of entry of MNC in terms of foreign investment. Now, first of all, let me ask you, what does the word investment mean? Investment basically means putting in of money, and we expect this money to give us greater profit or greater turnover in the future, right? So you're basically putting in money expecting a higher return, and this is what is called an investment. What is foreign investment? Foreign investment is when this investment or this money is put into a country that is not your own. It's as simple as that, okay? So for example, if I'm an Indian and there is another company that is putting in money into my country, then that is a foreign investment. Or if I'm a company and I want to put in money into another country as an investment, then that is also foreign investment, right? So way of number 1 of entry of MNC in terms of foreign investment is when MNCs buy assets like land, building and equipment. This is known as foreign investment, right? Then let's talk about the second method. The second method is to set up production jointly with some of the local companies of other countries. So this, for example, over here is an example that you've got in your CBSE textbook. It's not an example that is valid anymore. It talks about the partnership of Ford, which is a foreign company, and it talks about Mahindra & Mahindra, which is a local company that manufactures jeeps and trucks. Now, Ford is no more in India, so technically this example is not really valid anymore, but the reason that I'm telling you this is because this is there in your textbook, so you may get a question stating this particular example, so you just need to be aware. Now, these two, Ford and Mahindra have went into a partnership, and this was the way for Ford to enter India. What is the benefit to a foreign company for tying up with a local company? Well, from the foreign company's point of view, the foreign company has now a ready-made database for marketing, right? It has presence in that particular country, which is so important. It has production units which are already ready, up and running. So in terms of the MNCs, from the MNC's point of view, the investment that they put in has to be much less, right? Because all of this is already readily available to them. So for them, it's a big advantage. Now, how does the local company benefit? Why would a local company want to tie up with an MNC? What benefit is it to them? Right, Maruti and Suzuki is an example, also Tejasvi. Right, what is the benefit of a local company? Well, the local company's point of view, the MNC is putting in so much money. So there's additional investment, and these people over here, the local companies, can now buy new machines. They have faster production. They have better quality. Apart from this, the MNCs will bring with them probably the latest technology, which again will make the local company's product so much better, right? And their name is also growing. So if you think about it, this kind of setup is a win-win situation for both the foreign company as well as the local company, and sometimes MNCs enter a new country in this kind of way, right? This is the second point. Third point over here is the MNC could buy over local companies to expand production. Okay, let me give you an example. Let us assume and let us say that there is a company, a small company, that is probably not doing so well, okay? I mean, it's just sort of getting by, it's just breaking even maybe. It's not making too much profit. Now, in this sort of situation, you have this big MNC that comes to this small company and says, you know what, I want to buy over your company. Now the small company will probably think and say, what should I do? Should I be bought over or should I not be bought over? Think about it from the smaller company's point of view. From the smaller company's point of view, sometimes they say, yes, let the MNC buy me over. Why? Because maybe the amount of money that they are getting by selling their company to the MNC, they will not make the same amount if they were to be running the company on their own. So from that point of view, it makes much more economic sense for this smaller company to be bought over by a larger company. So for example, you had Cargill Foods, which was an MNC which bought over or acquired Parak Foods, which is a smaller Indian company. What is Cargill Foods' advantage? Well, they got a large marketing network database. They had production units which were already ready. They had a presence in India. And Cargill is now the largest producer of edible oil in the country. So you see, it's a win-win situation again for both parties involved. Right? Yashwardhan Rathore says, one of the best teachers on YouTube is Tarana ma'am. Thank you. All right. Okay, let's move on to the, yes, Disha, local companies will develop also. Absolutely right. Okay, fourth way of entry of MNC is what? Hand over production to small producers around the world. So let's say that you have an MNC that is producing shoes or t-shirts. Let's take t-shirts, it's easier. I like t-shirts. Okay, t-shirts, okay. Now it is not necessary that this particular company is producing their own t-shirts. It may be much more cost effective for them, and even in terms of quality may be better for them to hand over this t-shirt manufacturing to a smaller producer somewhere else. You remember earlier I had spoken to you about an MNC that had its headquarters in USA, but then was giving the factory production to a place like China. So this is similar to that. They hand over the production to a small producer. That producer manufactures the t-shirt, but in this case, the t-shirts that are manufactured by the small producer are not sold under the name of the small producer. They are sold under the brand name of the MNC, right? And since they're being sold under the brand name of the MNC has complete right to say what the price should be, what the quality should be, what the delivery should be like, and what the labor conditions should be like. So this is the fourth way of the MNCs entering into the country. Right? So like I said, if it's a 2-mark question, all you need to do is list down these 4 points. If it's a 3-mark question or a 5-mark question, you've got enough content to cover you for those also. Okay, right. Let's move on to ask a question that you could possibly get in this particular topic. Now, you could get a question to say, What steps have the Indian government taken to attract foreign investment in the country? Now, this could be a 3-mark question. Why is the Indian government, first of all, think about it, why is the Indian government trying to attract MNCs? Well, obviously the Indian government wants more economic growth, right? And so if these MNCs come to India, they're going to be putting in a lot of money into the system. There's going to be foreign investment, right? And the local producers are also going to be then benefiting, like we discussed before. So what does the government do to attract these MNCs? These are the points for this particular question. The government, to attract MNCs, has set up what we call special economic zones, or SEZs. Now, these SEZs, or these special economic zones, they have absolutely world-class facilities in terms of constant power supply or electricity supply, water supply. The roads are fabulous. The transport systems are quite developed. There is enough storage. There are recreational and educational facilities. Now, from an MNC's point of view, doesn't it make more sense to come and set up their production or set up their center somewhere where there are all these world-class facilities? Why would an MNC want to go and set up where probably there's no power supply, where there's water shortage, right? Or where the transport systems are not good? It would not make sense for them. So from their point of view, they've got this ready-made center over here. They've got people living over there. They've got people working over there. There are recreational facilities. There are educational facilities. I mean, everything is over there. So MNCs, from their point of view, it's a really good place to come and set up their business over there. So this is what the government does. Apart from this, the companies who set up the production units in SEZs, they have a really good advantage. You know what the advantage is? They do not have to pay tax for an initial period of 5 years. Imagine that. No tax. Imagine the amount of profit that the MNC would be making with something like this, right? So, well, this is exactly what the government is doing. The government is doing this so that MNCs can come to our country, and from the MNC's point of view, if they don't have to pay tax, wow, that's just profit all the way, and that's what the goal of the company is in the first place, right? Then, the government has also allowed flexibility of labor laws. How will this help the MNC? Let's think about it. Supposing you have an MNC that has seasonal production, okay? Now, in this terms of seasonal production, they don't want to hire laborers or workers for the entire year because their production unit or that production cycle is only those many months of the year. So, from their point of view, if they're able to hire workers for a shorter period of time, they're not paying the workers that much, right? So, from their point of view, this is a very good thing. They just hire it from the labor for when it is needed, and then they let go of the labor when it is not needed. This is a great system for the MNCs. Now, I'm going to be discussing this point, this particular point, a little bit later, because this is actually a double-edged sword. This is very good for the MNCs, but is it so good for the laborers or the workers? We will discuss this later on, okay? But from the MNC's point of view, this is a very good thing, and this is one of the things that the government is doing to attract the MNCs to India, right? Okay. Now, let's move on to our next topic, okay? What was that I saw? Sohani, don't worry about this. Concentrate on your studies. Sohani, what are you worried about? We're with you. We'll make you, you'll sail through your exams, okay? We're with you. We're supporting you all the way, right? Yashat says, how industries put money for their industry setup and for equipments. Absolutely right. IT parks are examples of SEZs. Absolutely right, right? Okay. Fine. Let's move on to our next topic, which is foreign trade and integration of markets. Now, let's discuss first of all, what is foreign trade? Okay, forget about foreign trade. What is trade in the first place? Trade is exchange of goods and services, right? Wherever there is exchange of goods and services and there is generation of income, we are saying that trade is happening, right? Now, we understand what trade is. What is foreign trade? Foreign trade is basically when trade is happening not only with your own country, it's happening with other countries also, right? This is foreign trade. Now, what is the advantages or what is the benefits of foreign trade? Well, foreign trade creates the opportunity for the local producers to reach beyond the domestic markets, which means that now they're not only earning money by selling in their own country, they're selling to other countries too, and possibly earning foreign exchange with this, foreign currency with this. So foreign trade has this very big advantage. Apart from this, foreign trade increases the choice of goods and services. There are so many people in so many different countries that are producing the same goods and services. So from the consumer's point of view, wow, I have so many goods that I can choose from, right? It's a great thing. And because of this choice of goods and services, because the consumers have so much more choice, actually what happens to the prices of these goods, they tend to become equal, or they tend to become more fair. How does this happen? Let me explain. Supposing you have just one person who has a monopoly of producing a particular good. Now this person who has a monopoly, he can decide how much to sell the good at, and he probably prices it really, really high, which probably not be a very economic decision or a very cost-effective decision for the consumers or the buyers, right? But since this person has the monopoly, he is the one who decides the price, right? But now think about it. If this monopoly disappears and you have other people who are producing the same goods and services, what does this person doesn't have a monopoly anymore, and he will have to price match, right? Because if people are going to get a slightly less expensive good, they're definitely going to buy that. So from that point of view, it will become a very fair price, and this is what foreign trade does. Okay, this is one of the advantages. And so foreign trade, when you're dealing with so many different countries and goods and services are being exchanged, foreign trade basically results in connecting the markets, and it lands up in the integration of markets in different countries, right? Because different markets are buying and selling from each other, and this is what foreign trade is about. And if you are asked what are the advantages of foreign trade, well, you will put in these points: that it creates an opportunity for the local producers to reach beyond their domestic markets, it increases the choice of goods and services, and the prices of similar goods in the two markets tend to become equal, right? All right, now talking about integration or interconnection of markets, we've come to the main concept, globalization. What is, yes, actually globalization, absolutely right. Globalization is this same very process of rapid integration or interconnection between countries. Like I love to say, it's this world becoming a small global village where everyone is more connected. How is there interconnection? How is there integration of the markets? Well, there's exchange of goods and services like we spoke about. There is exchange of investments. There is exchange of technology, and there is exchange of people, whether it is in terms of tourism, whether it is in terms of education, people traveling for education, whether it is people traveling for jobs. Globalization makes the world a small and more connected place, and I just love this concept. Okay, yes, it is integration of markets. Okay, now we will move on to our next topic. Okay, factors enabling globalization. What are the factors enabling globalization? Well, the two factors enabling globalization is technology and liberation of foreign trade and foreign investment. Disha says, does it contribute to GDP, ma'am? Well, that really depends, Disha. It could and it couldn't. It really depends on how that particular sector is doing, right? I will be talking about the effects of globalization a little bit when we are talking about the impact, when we are talking about the WTO. You will understand a little bit more about how it works, but basically there's no hard and fast as to whether it will or will not. It depends on the sector. Okay, now where you could get a question to ask you what are the factors enabling globalization, in which case you just give these 2 points, and you could probably say 1 or 2 points about these points, about these 2 individual points, if it's a 1 mark or a 2 mark question. You could also get a question asking you, how does technology enable globalization, or how does liberation of foreign trade and foreign investment enhance globalization or enable globalization? Well, for that I'm going to be discussing both of these points separately, right? Okay. let's understand how technology enables globalization. Now, this is something that I think I discussed this even in the CBSE sample paper discussion, right? Because there was a question about it. So I'm going to discuss the same thing again. Technology enables globalization. How? How does technology help the world to become a smaller place or help the world to become more interconnected? Well, obviously technology helps. Think about technology in terms of telecommunication facilities. Telecommunication facilities like telephone, mobile phones, all of these things, they are used to contact people and access information. Right? Today you can share so much information, you can get so much information because of these telecommunication devices. Right? So obviously it's helping the world to become a smaller place. Then technology helps to communicate from remote areas because of the development of satellite communication devices. Hey, talking about satellite communication devices, can you think of one satellite communication device? Well, I can think of one, and it's something that I can't do without. Tring, tring, my phone. What do I use my smartphone for? My smartphone today, if I want to just pick up my smartphone and I want to check what the weather is, in a matter of seconds, I know the weather in any country of the world. If I want to buy a particular good or maybe a t-shirt that is sold in USA, in a couple of seconds, I can place the order. Isn't it? So trade is happening because of satellite communication devices. Information is being got because of satellite communication devices. Satellite communication devices even help us to communicate with each other. So today, at this point in time, there is not a single place in this world that you can't really connect to if there's no technology, right? So technology really helps this, and this is why this is a great factor that enables globalization. Talking about technology, computers, yes, laptops, mobile phones, television, computers. Can you think of a world without a computer? Now at this point in time when we are so used to computers, one day when we don't have the computer or the system fails, what happens? We start panicking because we feel like we're not connected, right? So computers are so important. How much work gets done on the computer? How much information is accessed on computers? How much information is shared through the internet? So this way again it's helping the world to connect, right? Okay. Electronic mail or email, voicemail, again technology, right? Imagine in like 1 second I want to talk to someone in the Mumbai office. All I have to do is send them an email. Within 2 minutes probably, if they're at their system, I get a reply. So quick and almost at negligible costs. Economically viable also. So this way technology really helps the world to become this global village. I can't think of another word. I'm really sorry. I keep trying to describe it in a better way, but I really like this concept of the world being a global village. Okay, let's move on to Tisha says, ma'am, you're so sweet. Indrajit says, best teacher, thank you. Okay, Tarana ma'am is best. Blink if you agree. How sweet. Thank you. Okay, second factor that helps to enable globalization, it's liberalization of foreign trade and foreign investment, right? Now, you may get a question to ask you, what is liberalization? Well, removing trade barriers or restrictions set by the government is known as liberalization. When the government reduces trade barriers, drops restrictions, it is known as liberalization. But what are trade barriers? Let us discuss this. Okay, what are trade barriers and why are trade barriers put? Okay, let us assume that we have two toys. Okay, we have one Indian toy, cute little teddy bear, and we have one imported, say, Chinese toy, cute little teddy bear, and both of these are at the price of both of these is 100 rupees. Right? Now, as a consumer, if you have both these cute little teddy bears in front of you and both of them are more or less the same, the quality is more or less the same, and both of them are priced in the same way, there will probably be some people will say, which one should I buy? You know what, I'll buy the imported one. That might be better. Tends to happen, right? So in this case, what will happen? If people buy the foreign goods, what will happen to the local manufacturers? The local manufacturers will suffer, right? So what does the government do when the government does not want the local manufacturers to suffer? In this case, what the government does is introduces trade barriers. How do they introduce a trade barrier or restriction? Well, they put a tax. They put an import tax on that imported good. So now this cute little teddy bear that was initially priced at 100 rupees, because of the import tax of 20 rupees, now this price of this cute little teddy bear has become 120 rupees. Imported toy, 120 rupees. Indian toy, 100 rupees. Both are same quality and both are so cute. Now which one will the consumer pick? Naturally, now the consumer is going to pick the cheaper one, right? So in this way, the government, to protect our local manufacturers, they put in trade barriers, or they introduce these sort of taxes. So basically the government uses trade barriers. They increase trade barriers when they want to reduce the import of a particular good, and they drop the trade barrier when they want to increase the import of a particular good. And this is basically done according to the government's discretion based on what they feel the best thing is. Right? Now this is what a trade barrier is, and this is why governments put trade barriers. Right? Now you could get a question talking about this example of a teddy bear that I just explained over here. You could get an example that says, if the Indian government puts a tax on the import of toys, how would it affect the import of Chinese toys? We discussed this, right? If the Indian government has imposed a trade barrier by putting a tax on imports, what is going to happen? Because of the tax on import, the Chinese toys will become more costly. The buyers will have to pay a higher price on the imported toys, and Chinese toys will no longer be as cheap in the Indian markets, and imports from China will reduce, and the selling of our local goods will increase. Simply this. Okay, so this is it. Now, you could get a question again talking about the same topic. You could get a question to ask, why do the governments use trade barriers? Well, I just discussed this, right? What does Nikesh say? Increasing tax, I don't know, it disappeared. Can I have that comment back, please? Increasing, okay, that increasing tax on imported goods in turn. Can I see that, please? Increasing tax on imported good in turn increases the cost of goods. Absolutely right, Nikesh. This is the reason for increasing the tax on that, because they want to reduce the import. Absolutely correct. Okay, so why do governments use trade barriers? For this very reason that Nikesh said, it's to regulate foreign trade. They decide how they want to regulate it. The government decides what kind of goods should be imported and what kind of goods should not be imported, and this way they use trade barriers to regulate this. And trade barriers help to decide how much of each good should be imported. I mean, basically the government decides whether or not to put trade barriers based on how much they want to import each good, right? So this is basically, it's the same concept. You could get this question in terms of the earlier question, which is about the Chinese toys, or you could get this question in terms of this question. Right? Liberalization is derived from the Latin word liber, which means free. Yashad said, yes, correct. It basically means freedom, right? Correct. Liberty, correct. Okay, now talking about liberty and liberalization, you may get a question which asks you, how is the liberalization policy of India evolved after independence? Well, to discuss how the liberalization, again I'm stumbling over my words, what's wrong with me today? How has the liberalization policy evolved after independence? Well, for that, we need to know what was happening before the liberalization policy of 1991 came about, right? So let me tell you what was happening before the liberalization policy of 1991. It was very similar to what I told you at the beginning of the session about around 20 years ago, when there were no MNCs over here. The imports were not that well at that point in time. The imports and exports, the import of finished goods and export of raw material was basically what was happening at this point in time. Now at this point in time, trade barriers were put on a lot of the imported goods, and this was before the liberalization policy of 1991. Trade barriers were put on foreign trade and foreign investment, which means the government was not allowing foreign companies to invest in our country. Why were they doing this? Well, they were doing this because if you think about it, we had just come out of colonization from the British. At this point in time, the government thought it was the best thing to protect our local people. They wanted to protect our local producers. They wanted to build up our local producers. So they felt at this point in time, if the foreign goods are going to come, what is going to happen? Our local producers are going to get exploited and our local producers will not be able to do well. So to protect our local producers and to sort of encourage them more, at that point in time, the government was discouraging MNCs, foreign trade, foreign investment at that particular time, right? And at that point in time, India allowed the imports of only essential items, right? But then, why was the liberalization policy of 1991 introduced? Well, at some point in time, what happened was around 1990, there was the Gulf War. And this is a background that I'm telling you. It's not part of this question, but it's just for you to understand it. Around 1990, there was the Gulf War, and at that time, you had the prices of oil in the Middle East that shot up, okay? Like a lot. And as a result of this, there were direct repercussions on India. India was in severe debt. India did not, at that point in time, there was this economic depression. India did not have enough foreign exchange to last it for more than 2 weeks. So it was a really serious situation. And it was at this point in time that the government decided to introduce the liberalization policy of 1991. Basically, the LPG policy, which is liberalization, privatization, and globalization, right? They did this because they wanted to bring about more economic growth, and at this point in time they felt this would be the best thing to do to increase economic growth and get out of this debt or this economic depression, right? So what did they do with the liberalization policy of 1991? Trade barriers were reduced, right? So which means that they started allowing more imports into the country by reducing the trade barriers. As a result of increased imports, there was more competition in the market. Naturally, I spoke to you about this before, right? When there is foreign trade, there is more competition in the market. Now, competition is not always a bad thing. This competition actually helped the local producers, because now the local producers realized that the consumers have such a big choice. So then they started increasing their quality and they started becoming more excellent at what they do, and in this way they also upped their performance. So this was a good thing actually. Then now goods could be easily imported and exported, so there's foreign trade, and foreign companies could now set up factories and offices in India, so there's foreign investment, and businesses were allowed to make decisions freely. Right? So again, all of this is leading to more economic growth, and it's overall, it really helped the country to get out of the dire situation that it was in. So if you get a question to ask you, how has the liberalization policy of India evolved after independence? These are the points that you can say. You can first discuss what was happening before the liberalization policy of 1991, and then you discuss how this situation changed after the liberalization policy of 1991. Right? I'm very glad to see my favorite teacher, Tarana ma'am. How sweet. Thank you, Prince Yadav. Okay. Now, you could also get a question to ask you, what was the situation like before the liberalization policy of 1991? And in which case you answer only this part of it. Clear? Alright, with this, let's move on to our next topic, which is World Trade Organization, or WTO. Under this particular topic, we're going to be talking about the functioning of the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, and we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking about whether the WTO is biased. So let's first, Nikesh, yes, it's the World Trade Organization. Ma'am, you're always the best and most energetic teacher I have ever met and learned from. Thank you, Shiva Kumar. Okay, let's talk about the WTO. What is the WTO? Yes, Yashar, the World Trade Organization is the WTO. What is the importance, or what is the aim, or what are the functions of the WTO? Well, this is what I'm going to be discussing just now. The World Trade Organization was started at the initiative of the developed countries. The developed countries felt that there should be free and fair trade, and this organization was created with the aim of liberalizing international trade, to make trade easier between different countries, to facilitate free and fair trade, to facilitate more economic growth for all countries. Very noble. The aim is very noble, okay? We'll be discussing whether this really happens later. So anyway, this was started at the initiative of the developed countries. This was done with the aim or the goal of liberalizing international trade. What is the function of the WTO? Well, the function of the WTO is that it establishes certain rules and then it sees that these rules are obeyed by the member countries of the WTO. So for example, they say drop trade barriers, allow imports. There are various rules like that, and all the member countries who are part of the WTO, they have to follow these rules, right? What is the strength of the WTO? Well, it's nearly 160 member countries as of June 2014. Right? This is what the WTO is, and this is how it functions. It sets down rules, and this is what the goal of the WTO is. Like I said, to have more free and fair trade. But the question over here, the philosophical discussion that I want to have with you is that, is there really free and fair trade? Is this really being practiced? This is what is supposed to be on paper. But is this really happening? Are the rules the same for developed countries as well as for developing countries? Well, sadly, it doesn't always happen like this. Let's talk about developed countries. Are they benefiting more? Well, they are. Let me tell you how. Let's talk about, say, agriculture. Okay, now let's say that the agriculture in a developed country like, for example, USA, they have a GDP of just 1%. Huh? That is the contribution to the GDP, 1%. And what is the contribution to the total employment? It's just 0.5% of the total employment. So obviously, this is a sector that is not doing very well in the developed countries, right? So if you think about it, if these farmers were to sell their products to another country, they would really have to hike the prices, right? But what does the developed country like USA do? What they do is they give massive amount of money. The government gives massive amount of monies for production and export to these farmers or to these producers, right? And so they're really helping out these farmers or producers, which technically is a violation of the WTO rules. The government is not supposed to help the farmers in this particular way, because why? What is going to happen if the government helps the farmers in this particular way? Well, think about it. Now that these farmers have received this money, they've received so much investment, their cost is nothing much. So when they go to a different country or a developing country, naturally, because their cost is not much, they can afford to sell these goods in other countries at a much lower price. Right? Now, what is happening in these other countries? This is the thing to think about. If you take a developing country, now a developing country, from their point of view, the WTO has told them that you have to drop trade barriers, which means as a developing country, the developing country cannot say, no, I will not allow the import. The import has to come into the country. But what is happening is the import that is coming in is coming at such low prices because that developed country has helped its farmers or producers so much. So they are selling here at a low price. But in the developing countries, are they getting that much support from the farmers, from the government? No. Over here, because of the rules of the WTO, the developing countries are not really helping, the governments are not really helping their farmers. So these farmers have to sell their goods at much higher prices. Right? Now, what from the point of the consumer, there are two goods that are coming into the market. One is the imported good, which is so cheap, and the other one, which is a local good, which is so expensive, because these people, the developing countries, are not receiving the help that they're not receiving help from the government according to the rules of the WTO. Which one is the consumer going to buy? Naturally, the consumer is going to buy the one that is cheaper, right? So who is getting the benefit of this? Well, the benefit is definitely going to the developed countries because it is their goods that are selling, right? So the question over here is this really free and fair trade? Are the rules different? I mean, they're supposed to be the same, but is this being practiced the same all over? Well, this is something to think about. Okay? All right. Now, let us move on to our next topic, which is impact of globalization. We're going to be discussing both the positive as well as the negative impacts of globalization. You could get a question to ask you only about the positive impacts of globalization, or you could get a question to ask you about the negative impacts of globalization, in which case we are giving you both so you're able to answer. But if you get a question to ask you what are the impacts of globalization and it's a 5-mark question, well then you need to give both these impacts. I have discussed this particular question earlier with you in the CBSE sample paper discussion. I'm going to discuss it again. Okay, now let's talk about the positive impacts of globalization. Are there any positive impacts of globalization? Well, of course there are. What are the positive impacts of globalization? I've already spoken to you that globalization or foreign trade has resulted in greater competition. As a result of greater competition, today we have so many choices in terms of consumers, right? And as a result of this, there is an increased quality of products and services because local manufacturers are increasing their quality, and as consumers we have more choices. So this is definitely a positive impact of globalization, right? Then MNCs have increased investments. Is this a positive impact? Well, of course this is a positive impact of globalization. Think about it, yeah? There's so much money coming into the country. Today you have so many different products out there, cell phones, soft drinks, I mean automobiles, electronics, such a big choice. What do all these setups over here, what do all these goods being manufactured over here, what is the result of this? Well, there's more jobs, there's more employment, and with the variety of goods that we have available to us at cheaper prices, there is an increased living standard of the people, and this is also definitely a positive impact of globalization. What else? Is there another impact, positive impact? Well, there's the impact on the Indian companies. This is also positive because now the local companies, because of the advent of the MNCs, they are now, and foreign trade happening, now they can sell raw material to the MNCs. So again, they are earning more money. There's more economic growth. And not just that, because of the exchange of technology, which is basically nothing but globalization, the top companies, Indian companies, have invested in much newer technology, and as a result of this, their products are so much better today, and they themselves have gone on to become MNCs. For example, Tata Motors, Infosys, today these people are themselves multinational companies where their brand is extending to not just India but so many places across the world, and I think that's wow, right? So all of this is definitely a positive impact of globalization. Okay, positive impact done. Are there any negative impacts? Well, always two sides of the same story, two sides of the same coin. Unfortunately, there are some negative impacts, right? What is the impact over here? Small producers are severely affected. These small producers, when the MNCs flood the market with cheap products, at that point in time what happens is there are cheap products of a better quality. Who is going to buy from the local producers? Naturally, the local producers are not going to buy, and probably they'll go out of business. So from their point of view, it's definitely a negative impact of the imports coming in, right? Then flexible labor laws. I spoke to you about this. I told you that the government makes the labor laws more flexible to attract MNCs, right? This is one of the ways, and this is from the MNC's point of view, this is really great. But from the laborer's point of view, is this a great thing? Do they have any job security? If they are being hired only for that one season of production or for those couple of months, which means they are being hired and fired at will, there's no job security. Absolutely not. Imagine the kind of insecurity that would exist with the laborers because of this, right? Employment goes down, insecurity increases, no security at all. Apart from this, the labor laws, that now flexible labor laws, they ignore many of the provisions that are actually supposed to be for the protection of the workers. So for example, now because of all this, the laborers have to work much longer hours. The working conditions are poor, there's no job security, low wages. So overall, from their point of view, it's definitely not a great thing, right? So this is why I said two sides of the same coin, but it is what it is. Okay, all right. with that, I'm happy to say we've covered the entire chapter. We've covered all the concepts that we've spoken about. We've spoken about questions that could come from each of these concepts also. And I'm sure that you know how to go ahead and answer this now, right? So what did we discuss? We discussed production across countries. We spoke about MNCs over here. We gave you a particular few examples of MNCs also that were there in your textbook. We spoke about interlinking production across different countries. This is the 4 ways of MNCs entering into the country, right? How do the MNCs enter a country? I gave you 4 points for these and explained these 4 in detail. Then we spoke about foreign trade and integration of market. We spoke about the advantages of foreign trade. We spoke about globalization. We discussed what globalization is. We spoke about the factors enabling globalization, where we spoke about both technology and liberalization. I'm just putting LIB over here, okay, liberalization, and increase in foreign investments. We spoke about the World Trade Organization, and we discussed what the World Trade Organization is and whether the World Trade Organization is biased or not. And we spoke about the impact of globalization, both positive and negative. And with this, we have ta-da! We have finished globalization and the Indian economy. So I'm sure that all of you are much more prepared now. Disha says, wonderful explanation, ma'am. Thank you for this amazing session. Thank you, Disha. Okay, and ma'am, you're always the best. Okay, I read that before. Thank you so much, Shiva. One more wow session, ma'am. We'll keep giving you more wow sessions because, my dear students, Byju's always has you covered. We're with you all the way, right? So any doubts that you have, please go back to our sessions. We have discussed all the major chapters. Go check out those sessions again. By watching those sessions again and again, you're going to be able to revise your concepts more thoroughly, right? So we've got you covered. And talking about sessions, our next one is on geography. A couple of you had asked for this particular chapter. We're going to be talking about lifelines of the economy, right? And this is going to happen on 18th February at 5 p.m. So please stay tuned for this. Apart from this, in our journey of supporting you, please do attend the free trial classes that we have for you. The link is in your description box. Click on it, attend the trial classes, make maximum use of the things that we are putting out for you over here, because we really want you to do well, and we are sure that you will. So best of luck. Bye bye.